following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hi, this is Chuck Stevens, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the January 28th issue of the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. First up, Niagara dodging provincial recycling struggles. Clear bags will still be picked up as privatization of collection hits snags elsewhere. As the Ontario government completes the privatization of the recycling industry, Niagara appears to have escaped recent struggles that municipals such as Peel Region and Toronto are dealing with. The most recent issue to come to light is in Peel, where Circular Materials, the municipality's producer responsibility organization for recycling, mailed residents cards notifying them overflowing materials left beside bins in clear bags will not be collected as of March 1st due to logistical issues. Recyclables must be loose and placed in a blue bin. The Producers' Responsibility Organization later delayed the ban until May 30th to give residents more time to prepare. Circular Materials also serves as Niagara's Producer Responsibility Organization, but indicated it will continue to collect clear bags. In an email to the Standard, Jennifer Kerr, Director of Community and Media Relations for Circular Materials, confirmed there are no changes to set out practices or the recycling collection system in the Niagara region. Circular Materials is funded by companies that include McDonald's, Costco, and Loblaw, and is responsible for the collection, sorting, and processing of recyclables. Dave Youssef, the Niagara region's manager of waste policy and program development, confirmed local officials who weren't aware of any planned or significant changes to local recycling by Circular Materials. While the region is no longer responsible for blue and gray box programs under full producer responsibility, its switchboard is still receiving calls from residents. Following the province's full transition of the blue box program on January 1st, 2026, we have seen an increase in inquiries, particularly around sorting and where specific materials belong under the new system, Youssef said. We continue to redirect residents to resources offered by Circular Materials to help support accurate recycling. Youssef said a significant portion of calls are from businesses and institutional properties expressing concern about being excluded from the provincial recycling system after being deemed non-eligible sources, or NES. Under the new system, more than 4,000 non-residential properties across Niagara lost curbside recycling on January 1st. Niagara Region continues to advocate to the province for the inclusion of these properties, and we encourage businesses and other NES properties to continue voicing their concerns directly to the province as well, Youssef said. He said questions about pickup changes are best answered by the province or Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, known as RPRA. However, from Niagara Region's perspective, if the public is setting out recyclables, they should be picked up. RPRA is the provincially mandated regulator that ensures producers of packaging comply with waste reduction programs. Last week, in response to questions from the media, the RPRA said it is actively engaged with Circular Materials to ensure changes are in compliance with the new regulations in Peel, which includes Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon. In Toronto, residents in condos and apartments have reported delays where recyclables previously collected by the city on a regular basis have piled up for weeks. In Niagara, the region is still responsible for garbage collection, green bin compostables, leaf and yard waste, and large item pickup. It has a collection contracts with Miller Waste Systems Incorporated and GFL Environmental Incorporated. Prior to extended producer responsibility, the region was responsible for about 50% of recycling program costs. Earlier this month, Premier Doug Ford dismissed recycling problems as kinks being worked out, adding municipalities should be grateful for the money his government is saving them. Niagara's overall 2026 waste management budget is to decrease by 1.15% year over year, saving the average household about $3, depending on the municipality. Costs for waste management are allocated by the region to the lower tier municipalities, based primarily on the number of residential units, and applied to the assessed value of individual households. Our next article from the Niagara Falls Review: Marineland has a solid plan to move whales. Marineland has a solid plan to move Canada's last remaining captive whales and dolphins to several parks in the United States, Fisheries Minister Joanne Thompson said Tuesday. On Monday, the minister conditionally approved the shuttered Niagara Falls theme park's application to export its 30 belugas and 4 dolphins south of the border. This is a solid plan to allow these animals to live their life in much more healthy conditions, Thompson said. The conditions she placed on the export permits include a health assessment of the animals by an accredited veterinarian and a transportation plan to get them to the American institutions. Marineland is in talks with Shed Aquarium in Chicago, Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta, Mystic Aquarium in Connecticut, and SeaWorld, which has several U.S. locations. The tentative approval comes after Marineland presented what it called an urgent rescue solution to the federal government last week. Marineland gave Ottawa a deadline of January 30th to approve the export permits. Otherwise, it would go ahead with its backup plan to euthanize the belugas and dolphins, according to a letter Thompson wrote to the park that was obtained by the Canadian press. 20 whales, 1 killer whale, and 19 belugas have died at Marineland since 2019, based on internal records and official statements collected by the Canadian press. In October, Marineland applied to the federal government for export permits to ship its 30 belugas to Chimelong Ocean Kingdom, an aquarium in China. Thompson denied those permits, saying she would not subject the whales to a future performing in captivity, which is consistent with a federal law passed in 2019. In response to that denial, Marineland threatened to begin killing the whales unless it received emergency funding from the federal government. Ottawa did not provide funding. Marineland has consistently told Thompson in recent months it is in dire financial straits and needs financing in order to pay for the beluga's care. The park's latest request for export permits is different, Thompson explained. In this instance, it is an accredited site, and I'm confident that the standards of care for the belugas and dolphins will be in line with what exists within the Fisheries Act and what we expect in Canada, Thompson said. A 2019 law banned whale and dolphin captivity through Marineland's animals were grandfathered in. It also made breeding illegal, which forced Marineland to separate the male and female belugas. It also banned importing an exception for research purposes, but gave the minister the power to make an exception if it is in the best interest of the animals. Thompson said it was indeed in the best interest of the animals to be moved to the United States. The American Aquarium said they are deeply grateful to Fisheries and Oceans Canada for their commitment to the well-being of the belugas at Marineland of Canada. It is still too early to say exactly where the belugas may go or on what timetable, they said. As our organizations have said from the beginning, our focus is on the individual needs of the belugas themselves, said Shed Aquarium, Mystic Aquarium, Georgia Aquarium, and SeaWorld in a joint statement. To that end, our experts remain focused on using our recent observations of the whales to inform a potential rescue plan that is rooted in science and responds to the physical and social needs of the belugas. Our next story from the Niagara Falls Review, the front page: Rush bandmates give a boost to Neil Peart Memorial. Fundraising for a Neil Peart Memorial in Lakeside Park is back on track and expected to meet its $1 million target with help from Peart's bandmates. Rush is giving a portion of the proceeds from its upcoming 50-something tour to the St. Catharines Memorial, and the city anticipates that gift and donations generated from the buzz will launch the project over the finish line. The city's Neil Peart Commemorative Task Force has fundraised just more than $208,000 for the planned bronze sculpture installation of the world-renowned drummer who grew up in St. Catharines. I know there's been some nervousness about reaching the $1 million goal in a timely fashion, said Port Dalhousie Marty Mako, who recently joined the task force. He told city councilors the task force learned during its last meeting that Rush will donate some funds from its tour. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifson have joined with drummer Anika Niles to help complete and secure the project. Fundraising is tough in this environment, we're all aware, so the fact that Rush has really stepped up to the plate, I thought was newsworthy to highlight, Mako said. Councilors agree. I just want to thank Mako for bringing that into the limelight, said Meriton Con Greg Miller, who drew some groans and chuckles from those in the know for his use of Rush song titles. It's nice that this project won't go on until 2112, and it's closer to the heart of being completed. Peart, considered one of the greatest drummers of all time, grew up in St. Catharines and wrote the Rush song Lakeside Park about his days working at the Port Dalhousie Midway. He died January 7th in 2020 at the age of 67 from brain cancer. St. Catharines named its new pavilion in Lakeside Park after Peart following his death and established the Commemorative Task Force in April 2020 to commission a public work of art in his honor that would be paid entirely through donations. The task force selected Morgan MacDonald of Newfoundland Bronze Foundry from 29 entries to create the memorial, which will feature 2 bronze statues of Peart in his younger and later years, with a pathway connecting them. The pathway will include interactive panels about Peart's personal and professional legacy. But getting the word out about the $1 million fundraiser to Rush fans proved to be a challenge for the task force. A soft campaign began in 2021 during the COVID-19 pandemic, with the official fundraising campaign launched in September of 2024. It was at a standstill by July 2025 when Mayor Matt Cisco asked that the committee reconvene and discuss next steps. In October, Lee and Lifson announced they'll be going on tour this year for the first time since 2015. The pair, accompanied by German drummer Niles, will perform 58 shows in 24 cities in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico from June to December. Fans purchasing VIP experience tickets will see a portion of proceeds donated to support the commissioning of the public work of art in Peart's honor. St. Catharines City Councilors are not only hoping the tour will make the memorial a reality, but that Lee and Lifson make a stop at Meridian Center. It would be great if they were performing once in St. Catharines at our 6,000-seat arena like Elton John and numerous others A-plus performers, said Grantham COUN Bill Phillips, who said he hoped the city pushes to have them come. Phillips said you don't have a great band without a great drummer, and Peart was said to be the greatest. I think as a tribute to him, Rush should be here. Cisco said he will ensure a formal invitation is sent to the band to play at the arena. I know a couple of councilors have been pushing for that, and we're trying to create a pressure campaign to get them here, Cisco said after the meeting. Council received an update report on the Neil Peart Commemorative Task Force Monday. It also waived the city's public appointments policy to appoint Sister Judy Peart as the Peart family representative to the task force. The task force will continue to promote the project to ensure that all fans can participate. Donations of any amount are welcomed, but fans who donate $500 can have a personalized 250-character message engraved into a panel that is part of the memorial. There are also corporate sponsorship opportunities. The task force plans to wrap up the fundraiser at the end of this year. Deadline for donors and sponsors, December 17th. The city said the memorial will be constructed about a year after fundraising is complete, pending council approval. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Lots of ways to listen. You can always listen online at nfrs.org. That's where you can listen live, also on any podcast platform. And don't forget to download our free new app for your smartphone. We need something in place or we'll be facing a healthcare crisis. Port Colborne Mayor Bill Steele optimistic after meeting with Health Minister. There may be a reason for optimism, says Port Colborne Mayor Bill Steele, as a result of a meeting with Health Minister Sylvia Jones during last week's Rural Ontario Municipalities Association conference in Toronto. Steele said he and several of his city staff and council members met with Jones and ministry representatives to ensure the provincial government knows Port Colborne is not a dot on the map. We're a real community with real people who need care, he said. We pretty much made it clear to the minister that when the Niagara Health Urgent Care Center closes in 2028, we need something in place or we'll be facing a healthcare crisis. We're just asking the province to work with us now to prevent that. I think we got that out of the ministry. Steele said they discussed a proposal being developed by the city's Healthcare Advisory Committee for a new medical facility. It would tap into federal funding for construction costs, while the province contributes to operating costs. Steele recently toured a medical center in Stony Creek with Healthcare Advisory Committee members. Run by St. Joseph's Healthcare, it provides primary care services, diagnostic services, and services for stitches and casts. But patients needing more care are transported to the hospital emergency departments. It's something we'd love to emulate here, he said. Steele said the city would be willing to contribute funding if necessary. Port Colborne's not afraid to put some of our own money into this. With regard to health care, it's unfortunate the city has to be in this position because health care is not part of our mandate, but we are driving forward. We're trying to be a partner across all levels of government to make health care better. We just want things to be better than they are today. He said provincial health officials were receptive. They want to see what comes forward from us and look at what's going on with primary care in Port Colborne and our doctors, he said. Adding Bridges Community Health Center is also of interest. Steele said his city has moved on from plans discussed a year ago to establish a family doctor-run clinic on the first floor of Port Colborne's former hospital. That didn't materialize. I still think it's a missed opportunity, he said. But he said new funding programs being developed by the province hold potential for the city, such as one called FHO Plus that provides funding to assist physicians working in small family health organizations with the cost of bringing in staff to ease the administrative workload. Our local doctors are having a lot of capacity issues, facing 4 hours of administrative work per day, said Genevieve Renee Bison, the city's senior community engagement officer. She said that FHO Plus model is an indication the province is listening to concerns of local physicians. Meanwhile, Steele said work of the city's healthcare committee continues. A study is underway by KPMG with findings expected to be released next month. Next up, a man arrested after Welland's standoff, still without a lawyer. Danielle Tronco's next court appearance is set for February. A man charged with multiple counts of attempted murder following an armed standoff with police in Welland made a brief appearance in court on Tuesday. Danielle Tronco appeared in Ontario Court of Justice in St. Catharines via audio from the Niagara Detention Center in Thorold. The 59-year-old told the Justice of the Peace he had yet to secure a lawyer. During his last court appearance, a representative of Welland criminal lawyer Jeffrey Root said his office had been contacted by a third party, but had yet to meet with Tronco. On Tuesday, court was told the defendant, who is yet to schedule a bail hearing, is taking steps to retain counsel in Toronto. Justice of the Peace Nancy Rogers-Bain adjourned the matter until February. Tronco was arrested December 20th and charged with attempted murder after a nearly 24-hour standoff with Niagara Regional Police. The incident began while police were assisting Welland bylaw officers with a property matter that pertained to a fence at a former church-turned-residence on the corner of 2nd Street and Plymouth Road. Police said in a news release that bylaw employees were shot at and a police officer was struck in the chest. The officer, who had been wearing a bulletproof vest, was taken to a local hospital for treatment. She was later released. Immediately after the standoff started, police issued a shelter-in-place order for a large area and closed down multiple roads. The lockdown covered Welland Hospital, St. Mary Catholic Elementary and Plymouth Public Schools, and Plymouth Cordage Retirement Residence. Tronco was taken to an out-of-region hospital by Niagara Emergency Medical Services for treatment of a gunshot wound he sustained during an exchange of gunfire with police. He was originally charged with attempted murder, discharge of a firearm with intent, reckless discharge of a firearm, and unauthorized possession of a firearm. Earlier this month, police laid 20 additional charges in connection with the incident. The new charges include 6 counts of attempted murder and discharging a firearm with intent. Meanwhile, the Special Investigation Unit, Ontario's police watchdog agency, continues to investigate the circumstances surrounding the incident. Let's check in with the opinions section from the Niagara Falls Review. Trying to appease Trump doesn't work. This opinion written by Andrew Phillips. There was bound to be pushback against Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech at Davos. You don't poke the bear without the bear getting a tad irritated, and some others worrying they might get mauled in the ensuing rampage. So the bear, aka U.S. President Donald Trump, was outright warning Carney that Canada lives by the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. The Wall Street Journal reports Team Trump is livid over Carney's remarks. He's now Governor Carney, and Trump is threatening 100% tariffs if Canada makes a deal with China. More ominously, Trump's lieutenants are making threatening noises. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent openly encouraged Alberta separatism over the weekend, fueling suspicions that the province's tiny separatist movement, or more accurately, its American annexationist movement, has been integrating itself with the MAGA crowd. Bessent was engaging in what amounts to foreign interference in Canada's internal affairs. His government accused Canada of doing the same thing when Ontario ran an innocuous TV ad on tariffs. But by Trump's logic, they get to do whatever they want. Our job is to swallow hard and smile. All that is both predictable and worrisome. You have to wonder whether there's any real hope of a successful outcome to the CUSMA review, i.e. renegotiation this year. The Carney government seems to be preparing Canadians for the possibility that Trump and company will kick it to the curb, exposing our economy to the full impact of their tariff wars. Also predictable is the pushback at home. Carney's getting mostly applause from Canadians for the Davos speech. There are a few things we love more than seeing one of our own hailed as a hero on the world stage. But it's far from unanimous. In conservative circles especially, there's a significant body of opinion that thinks Carney was just being self-indulgent. Earning cheers from the international elite for raising a middle finger to Trump may feel great, goes the argument, but it will come at the cost of Canada's long-term prosperity as the U.S. enacts its revenge. In one version of this, the advice is that Canada should swallow its pride, play to Trump's ego, and do what's necessary to find a compromise that preserves our privileged access to the American market. The trouble with this line of thinking, of course, is that we've tried it and it doesn't seem to work. So did the rest of the world until last week. The Europeans bent over backwards last year to accommodate Trump. They signed trade deals that had no basis in economic logic. They flattered the president shamelessly. What did they get for all that? Trump's enduring contempt. Threats to seize the territory of a NATO member, and threats of yet more tariffs. It was only when they drew a firm line on Greenland that Trump retreated. The tariff threat vanished. Canada has tried the appeasement route for more than a year. Remember when Justin Trudeau rushed down to Mar-a-Lago when Trump, not yet in the Oval Office, first threatened tariffs? Trump humiliated him by serving him meatloaf in his crowded club dining room like any other paying guest and sent Governor Trudeau on his way. Carney got more respect, but he chose last year to drop the elbows and make nice with Trump. He put up with ridiculous claims about drugs flooding over the border. He worked hard to reach an accommodation over steel and auto tariffs, only to see that blown up because Trump pitched a fit over Ontario's ad campaign. The whole world has seen firsthand that going on your knees to Trump invites both contempt and more demands, and that whatever he signs on Monday may be so much waste paper by the weekend. Of course, there's a risk in standing up, but there's a risk, too, in lying down. Andrew Phillips is a staff columnist for the Toronto Star. Next from the opinion page, the Niagara Voices column, Ford Isn't the First to Push Reform, written by Gail Benjafield. Decades ago, about 20 people met at the St. Catharines Central Library branch to discuss our concerns about the St. Catharines Standard and how little information we gleaned from reading it. For example, we had only vague ideas as how municipal councils worked, even though we were individuals who had made presentations to city council meetings. I knew many of these community activists for various causes, but certainly not all. In good time, we formed a group and planned meetings to learn more about how municipal council worked. As we became known in the community, St. Catharines staff allowed us to meet in the council antechamber, where we interviewed various members of local government to better understand how local governments worked. We interviewed mayors, city and regional clerks, chiefs of staff, and started a newsletter about our findings. Word leaked out about this group, and CBC Radio expressed an interest in it. Apparently, citizens from other areas of Ontario wanted to know more about their local governments. CBC ran 3 interviews with us on the issues. Several people asked why group members didn't think of running for offices ourselves. Most of us just laughed at that thought of sitting around the horseshoe, having to read lengthy staff reports and deliberate endlessly. Those were heady days as many political wonks took an interest. At this time, the Mike Harris government was amalgamating regional governments in Ontario and cited huge savings for taxpayers. It was a contentious time indeed. Our group rented a room at the Russell Avenue Community Center and advertised we were going to discuss force amalgamations. We invited 3 experts to speak, Joe Kushner and Lou Soroka of Brock University's Economics Department, and Dave Siegel from the Politics Department. At the last moment, John Sewell, a former Toronto mayor and an anti-amalgamation advocate, said he wished to attend and address us. Our chosen speakers graciously declined to participate, so Sewell had the floor. The house was packed with local politicians that night, and we made front-page news the next day. Not all the politicians who attended were pleased by the press our group garnered. And here we are again with the Ontario government positioning amalgamation of the Niagara cities and towns into fewer packages with fewer politicians in the mix. Many letters to the editor of Niagara News outlets brim with questions and comments about fewer politicians, fewer communities, even fewer autonomous organizations such as conservation authorities, all in the name of the province having control over what municipalities can do. Top down all the way, Premier Doug Ford decides unilaterally what will happen with municipalities. His fiefdom reigns. On top of that, few women put their names forward for elected office. Of those who have, many of them received raw treatment from male counterparts and left well before their terms were up with bitter feelings. Recently, a successful local meeting was held by various women leaders to try and encourage more women to put their names forward. We'll have to see how that works out. I wonder how many people will bother as long as the provincial government continues to ignore communities that want to have citizens elect their municipal officials. And if it will keep using the Ford patronization wand to put preferred partisan pals in office while it forces diverse communities with distinct histories and geographies into one big manageable ball for the province to run. Gail Benjafield is a member of the Niagara Voices Community Editorial Board and a longtime activist and volunteer. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Chuck Stevens, your reader. Next, from the opinion page, Where's Our Love Actually Moment? Written by John Malloy. The hit Christmas movie Love Actually didn't age well. A montage of interrelated love stories set in London, England it's full of offensive stereotypes, silly storylines, and cringy dialogue. One story, however, seems to have stood the test of time. It involves a newly elected British Prime Minister, played by Hugh Grant, hosting a bullying U.S. president, played by Billy Bob Thornton, at his creepy best during a state visit to England. As the story unfolds, the president gets increasingly belligerent, leading to a showdown at a closing news conference. Having had enough, Grant accuses the U.S. president of taking what he wants and casually ignoring all the things that really matter to Britain. Pointing out that bullies only respond to strength, the fictional prime minister promises from now onward, I will be prepared to be much stronger, and the president should be prepared for that. How many of us have not been waiting for Donald Trump to have his Love Actually moment? As the world has watched, a steady stream of world leaders sits silently while the president belittles them. Haven't we all been desperately waiting for someone to stand up to him, Hollywood fashion, and put him in his place? I'm not the first to draw an analogy to Trump and Love Actually. As then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau prepared for his initial visit to Washington during Trump's first term, the media was full of comparisons between Trudeau and Grant's character, including their movie star good looks, with loads of speculation that the meeting would be a moment of high drama like the movie. We were all disappointed, although Trump obviously found Trudeau quite annoying. We never witnessed a showdown with Trudeau or anyone else. Then came Davos and Mark Carney's noteworthy speech about the state of the world. Although an extraordinary occasion, I would argue that it wasn't a Love Actually moment. Most importantly, Trump was not present for the speech, and his name was not even mentioned. Carney, unlike Trudeau or Grant, is also not seen as an international sex symbol. Although, as an aside, it was fun to hear Greenlandic politician Tilly Martusen gush about the Prime Minister on CBC. I have a ton of girlfriends who are like, I want to marry him, he is so great. But the biggest difference between Carney's speech and a Hollywood showdown is that instead of trying to deride or disparage Trump personally, Carney challenged his approach to international affairs. Great powers, he pointed out, were using their economic power as weapons, forcing middle powers to negotiate from weakness, accept what is offered, and compete with each other to be the most accommodating. Carney gave notice that Canada wasn't going to accept this approach. Domestically, it was going to strengthen its economy to reduce the leverage held by great powers. Internationally, it was going to help bring middle powers together to create a third path with impact by creating a dense web of connections across trade, investment, culture on which we can draw for future challenges and opportunities. Although the speech obviously got under the president's skin, it wasn't some personal Hollywood-style showdown, which is fine. We might all get some short-term gratification from seeing someone confront a bully, but where does that leave us in the long term? The importance of Carney's words is that instead of outlining how much Canada was going to try to beat Trump at his own game, it gave notice that we were no longer going to play that game. John Malloy is a former Liberal MPP and cabinet minister. Sticking with the opinion page, let's check in on some letters to the editor. Clearing the way. Popular haulage road is again being cleared of snow by the city of Niagara Falls to allow regular walkers, with dogs maybe, to enjoy the freshness of winter. Access to the walkway through Solar Park Playground is difficult. The narrow paths are unsuitable for plows. Students on their way to school, like walkers, need to carefully negotiate the area. Stepping up to the plate was a local resident who has no contract, but a concern for everybody's well-being. Thursday morning with his snowblower, the two access points from Haulage Road and Jupiter Boulevard were cleared due to his generosity. The phrase, "we don't know how lucky we are," holds true. Thank you on behalf of all those who will benefit from your thoughtfulness and hard work, writes Ross Smith from Niagara Falls. Next letter, action lacking. Regarding St. Catharines wants more police downtown. Niagara Regional Police are looking into it. This is from January 22nd. Mayor Matt Sisko's warning that downtown St. Catharines is at a tipping point should concern every resident, not only for what it says about public safety, but for what it reveals about this council's term as a whole. Business owners, workers, and residents have been sounding the alarm about disorder, safety, and decline in the downtown core for years. Only now, after vacant storefronts and reduced hours have become widespread, are we hearing calls for data reports in future meetings. Throughout this council term, major challenges have been met with caution, deferral, or finger-pointing rather than action. Prolonged inaction on transformative sites like the former GM lands, the largest ever property tax increase in the city's history, and repeated tax increases without a corresponding improvement in basic services, have contributed to a growing sense that this council governs slowly while problems accelerate. Residents are repeatedly told issues fall under regional or provincial authority. While jurisdictional limits are real, leadership is about advocacy, urgency, and accountability, not deflection. The troubling reality is, on too many files, waiting is defined this term. St. Catharines deserves leadership that anticipates problems, acts and delivers results, not one that acknowledges crisis after they become impossible to ignore. That's written by Alan McKay in St. Catharines. The Americanization movement. We're already facing the consequences of a two-tier healthcare, written January 20th, a response. Canada's healthcare system is being annexed in preparation to annexing all of Canada. Separatists of Alberta, Quebec, and others are wrong to believe they will survive. It won't be until they get sick and get health bills, lose their pensions, and join the ranks of the homeless today that it will finally dawn on them just how wrong they have been. Canadians have got to get our collective heads out of the sand. There's a huge Americanization movement inside Canada, bringing about the country's demise. March against this today or lose everything tomorrow. Written by Steve Hartwell in St. Catharines. Moving over to the Arts and Life section of the Niagara Falls Review. Words on Wines. Great subject. One of my favorites. Escape the winter doldrums with a virtual wine tasting tour. Find inspiration for a real-life food and wine adventure at home. Written by Jill Troyer, a contributing columnist. Reality in January sometimes feels like it's all about paying bills, shoveling snow, and eating kale. Yuck. So why not take a little break from reality? Join me in an armchair wine tasting tour in Italy. Let your mind roam through gently sloping vineyards and charming restaurants to imagine the rich aromas and flavors of the Piedmont region in northern Italy. Then bring it all home with plans for an indulgent weekend meal with the perfect wine pairing. Piedmont means literally the foot of the mountains. It is, in fact, surrounded by the Alps. Turin is the capital city of the area, and the vineyards and wineries are easy to get to from there. Views are stunning as you leave Turin and head into wine country, with small villages scattered among a patchwork of vineyards. The most treasured grapes here are those grown on south-facing slopes, where they bask in the sunlight and ripen slowly. Barolo is the best-known wine of the area. Here in Niagara, most of our wines are named after the grape variety, such as Merlot or Cabernet Sauvignon. In Italy, however, the wines often take their names from the wine regions where the grapes are grown and the wines are made. Barolo is named for the region it comes from. It is made entirely from Nebbiolo grapes. Often called the king of wines, Barolo is a great big red wine, big in aromas and flavors of dried cherry, roses, and spice, with savory herbs and licorice, big in powerful tannins and high acidity, and big in its ability to age. Aging adds to the complexity of flavors and layers in a taste of truffle and forest floor. Aging also allows the chewy tannins to soften. Barbaresco is a smaller region near Barolo, and the wine is also made from 100% Nebbiolo grapes. It shares many of Barolo's traits while being slightly more restrained. Barbaresco may be fruitier with red fruits like raspberry and more fragrant with notes of violet. Batisolo Winery is one of the largest producers of Barolo and Barbaresco. Canada is its largest export market, so the labels may be familiar. Batisolo's expansive tasting room overlooks acres of vineyards and sits above a huge and modern production facility. The winery boasts a cellar with an impressive 500 wooden barriques, 225-liter barrels, and 90 larger oak barrels. Both Barolo and Barbaresco age well. In fact, there are regulations for minimum aging periods for the highest tiers of each. Both are fantastic with food. Either is worthwhile when savored with a well-chosen menu. If you'd like to bring the spirit of Italy to your weekend, you can plan a perfect pairing. Battesina Langhi Nebbiolo, priced at $19.95 per bottle, is the least expensive option, although you may have to wait for a little while to find it at the LCBO. According to a spokesperson there, Batisolo wines have been listed at the LCBO for less than a year, and due to popularity, some are currently sold out. To meet customer demand, additional shipments have been scheduled throughout February and March. If you don't want to wait that long, there's still a wide range of Barolo and Barbaresco wines at the LCBO. Wines from a single vineyard designated as Cru, the various highest of quality, can cost more than $200, but the more approachable bottles will be around $30 up to $70 each. For a casual nibble and sip, a simple cheese and charcuterie board is a classic. Shop windows in the streets of Turin are filled with arrays of meat and cheese, and you'll see charcuterie boards on every menu there. The saltiness is a perfect enhancement to the deep, rich fruit flavors in the wine. Meat and cheese soften the tannin and give you a much softer mouthfeel. If you want to make a meal of it, consider mushroom risotto, perhaps with a finishing drizzle of truffle oil for added elegance. Pasta with creamy mushroom sauce works beautifully too. Earthy mushroom flavors echo the truffle notes in the wine and complement the savory herb layers. The town of Alba, near both Barolo and Barbaresco regions, is famous for its truffles and has an annual white truffle festival. Locals cook with it liberally. Meat can also be on the menu. A hearty beef stew or grilled lamb chop make a worthy matchup. Hunkering down at home during the winter might be more fun with some food and wine adventures, and perhaps you'll discover something new. Next month, I'll bring you on a flight of fancy to Burgundy, France, with different scenes and scents to explore. Written by Jill Troyer, who is an award-winning journalist, wine writer, and author of The Winemaker's Gamble. She lives in the heart of Niagara wine country. So you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Chuck Stevens, your reader. Glad you're with us. Let's get to the advice column. Sister's boyfriend too boring to be around. This is Lisa Tesher and her advice column. My sister's boyfriend is being boring. He talks about himself constantly, but he doesn't say anything interesting. He talks about his new boring internship and his boring classes. And it's not that I think his internship or classes are boring. He does. So he's not even trying to sell himself with any interest. I can't tell if he's complaining or bragging, but I start to tune him out because he just drones on about how boring everything is at the moment. I also have no sympathy for him because it's impossible to feel bad for him. He makes you not want to help him. I've spoken to my sister about it, and she just brushes it off, saying he just likes to complain. But how on earth does she put up with it? It's tedious. Signed, Boredom King. It does sound tedious and, well, boring. But why do you have to listen to him? He's your sister's boyfriend, not yours. Do you need to spend a lot of time with him? Your sister knows how you feel, so make plans with her separately. Go out to lunch or whatever you two like to do together. If there's a family dinner or event where you and her boyfriend are in attendance, spend your time talking to other people in the room and avoid any long periods of time alone with him. You owe it to both he and your sister to be kind and polite, but you don't have to be his friend. Next letter. When I was a teenager, I befriended a girl who had come here with her family from Europe. She was different, not only in her accent, but the way she dressed and carried herself. I was attracted to what I thought was an exciting personality. We spent our weekends hanging out, and through her friendship, I learned how to lie to my parents and smoke cigarettes. At first, I thought I was cool, and I thought everyone else was doing it, just with other friends. Then one day we went to the mall. We were shopping for clothes in one of those larger department stores and having fun in the dressing room. We tried on multiple ridiculous outfits and some cool stuff. We left after deciding we couldn't afford to buy anything. But when we got back to my house and she took off her coat, I realized she was wearing several items under her own clothes. I couldn't figure out how she had managed to get those alarm tags off, but she did. She was laughing and so proud of her accomplishment. I didn't know how to react. Fortunately, I was going out of town for an extended period with my mom, and while away I cried and told her everything. She and I came up with a plan for me to break away from the friendship slowly and safely. It's 2 decades later, and I just bumped into that woman. I was surprised to see her, but it was very awkward, especially after she said, "So nice to finally see you after the big dump. I just feel sick about the whole thing." Signed, Unfavorable Friendship. You were smart to confide in your mom all those years ago, and she was brilliant in helping you untangle yourself from a friendship that wasn't healthy. That girl needed to go down her own path, and she wasn't going to listen to you. I get how it still sticks in your craw. Most people don't like to hurt their friends, but you did the right thing at the time. Give yourself a break. Not every friendship is lifelong. Some feedback regarding the thing no one will talk about, September 1st and November 21st. Reader, I struggle with echo anxiety and grief about the state of our climate, and the refusal of the populace at large to even discuss the problem, never mind taking positive actions. Many of us who've been working hard for the environment have been made to feel isolated, dismissed, and betrayed, especially young people. I fully recognize many people don't want to feel the emotions associated with the crisis, but we really need to be able to talk about this subject with civility and open-mindedness. I read your column faithfully, but trying to save the planet is somehow out of bounds. Lisa Tesher is an advice columnist for The Star and based in Toronto. You can send her relationship questions on email, lisa@thestar.ca. Up next from the Canada and the World section, can you dig it? Federal transparency advocates critical of proposed changes. No serious interest in making the act what it should be, critics argue. Dateline Ottawa advocates of more federal transparency are concerned a federal review of the access to information regime will not fix long-standing problems and that it could make things even worse. The Treasury Board Secretariat announced the government review, which takes place every 5 years, in a news release last June. For a $5 fee, people can use the access law to ask for federal documents, anything from internal emails to policy memos, but the law is widely seen as antiquated and unevenly administered. Federal agencies are supposed to respond to a request within 30 days or provide valid reasons why more time is needed. Many users complain of lengthy delays as well as exemptions in the law that result in the release of heavily blacked out documents in response to their applications. A draft discussion paper reported by Treasury Board acknowledges shortcomings including poor federal information management, a lack of documentation of government decisions, no systematic declassification of historical records, and particular problems obtaining records related to indigenous affairs. The paper also suggests a need for new powers to take time extensions when requests are unclear or overly broad, and to extend timelines for processing requests when emergencies like pandemics, floods, or other disasters interrupt government operations. It also expresses reservations about the Information Commissioner's steady increase in the use of her powers to issue legally binding orders to departments, saying it is becoming challenging for institutions to manage. The draft discussion paper on possible policy approaches was obtained by independent journalist Dean Beebe through the Access Law. Treasury Board says it plans to publish policy proposals and conduct formal engagement with the interested parties and indigenous groups this winter. Researcher Ken Rubin, a frequent and longtime user of the Access to Information Act, was so alarmed by the discussion paper, he sent a letter to Treasury Board President Shafat Ali urging him to turn the review over to a House of Commons committee. Several of the paper's proposals to water down access requesters' rights put the minister in the untenable position of backing an already dismal system, the letter said. Rubin said he has not received a reply from the minister. James Turk, director of the Center of Free Expression at Toronto Metropolitan University, said it gives him no comfort whatsoever that the discussion paper acknowledges problems with the access regime because these issues have all been on the table for 20 or 30 years. I mean, it's not as if any of those is new. The last federal review of the access system began in June 2020, leading to a final report in December of 2022. Civil society groups, journalists, and members of the public who took part called for expansion of the law, removal of loopholes, stricter timelines for responses, and more resources to make the system work. The government opted to focus on better administration of the law, not changes to the legislation, which hasn't been fully overhauled since its passage more than 40 years ago. Turk noted that there have been numerous examinations of the access to information system over the decades. It seems to be a process that they routinely go through, he said. It seems apparent that this government, like most of its predecessors, have no serious interest in making the act what it should be. More from the Canadian press, this one written by David Baxter. I meant what I said. Carney says he explained his Davos speech to Trump. Prime Minister Mark Carney said Tuesday he told U.S. President Donald Trump personally that he meant what he said in his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland last week. Carney said Trump called him on Monday and they had a wide-ranging conversation about global events, including in Venezuela and Ukraine. Carney also said he told the president Canada was the first country to understand the change in U.S. trade policy and that Ottawa is now adjusting to the shift. I meant what I said in Davos. It was clear it was a broader set of issues, that Canada was the first country to understand the change in U.S. trade policy that he had initiated, and we're responding to that, Carney said on his way into a cabinet meeting. We're responding positively by building partnerships abroad. We're responding positively by building at home. And we are prepared to respond positively by building that new relationship through the Continental Trade Deal. He understood that, and it was a good conversation. During his speech in Davos, Carney called on middle powers to band together to counteract the effect of great powers that are trying to expand their influence through economic coercion. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told American media outlet Fox News on Monday he was in the room during the call and said Carney was aggressively walking back his comments at Davos. Of course, Canada depends on the U.S., he said. There's much more north-south trade than there could ever be east-west trade. Carney shook his head and said no when asked if he had taken back his Davos comments. On Fox News, Bessent said Carney should stop trying to push his own globalist agenda. The Prime Minister told reporters he explained to Trump Canada's recent tariff deal with China and Ottawa's broader strategy to diversify trade. I explained what we're doing, 12 new deals on 4 continents in 6 months. He was impressed and what we intended to do going forward, Carney said. Trump threatened last week to impose 100% tariffs on all Canadian imports if Canada strikes a trade deal with China. Conservative foreign affairs critic Michael Chong said it's unacceptable that Canadians learned about the call between Carney and Trump through American media. In a statement posted on social media, Chong said it's in the public interest for the Prime Minister office to share a public summary when these calls happen, as it does with other conversations between Carney and world leaders. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the January 28th issue of the Niagara Falls Review. So we read from the Niagara Falls Review every Sunday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Chuck Stevens. Thank you for listening.